Hey everyone, it's Terrence Branley with the Grow IT podcast. And today I have the real pleasure to have Tom Burlett from NCS Partners with me. And Tom is what you would consider to be, what I would consider to be a supply chain expert, a delivery system expert, and a digital transformation expert. So I hope I didn't pump you up too much here, Tom, but thanks for coming on. I'm looking
No, I
forward to
feel
talking for
good,
a while.
Terrence. I
So okay, I just gave you a big lead up there. So tell me about your background. You've got an extensive one. Did I nail it with the three big ones there? And
You did, you
tell me
did.
your background. Tell me about your journey.
Well, I've been. I like to start off with that. I've been in technology and actually in supply chain really since dinosaurs roamed the world. Um, my first real uh, warehouse. I was involved in a warehouse greenfield startup in the very early '90s, and at that point it was still completely homegrown systems on the old IBM mainframe, green screen, all of that stuff. No mouse. In fact, something that always stuck in my mind. I was working with somebody from Germany, and we looked at our first software package on a N tier on a client server platform, and they were using a mouse on a PC workstation. And he looked at them, he looked at me, he looked at them, he looked back at me, and he says, "There is no mouses in the warehouses." So, so we've really come a long way. Um, I spent a lot of time in the retail. I did I did e-commerce, direct to consumer retail before there was actually an internet and digital orders.
Hmm.
Um, before the World Wide Web was actually invented.
How did you do
Um,
that? Direct mail.
direct mail and
All
phone,
right,
a lot
I
of phone
remember that.
services.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
remember that.
Spiegel catalog for those older people on the call. And I kind of moved along, and then I landed in really kind of it was a great environment for me. I landed with a 3PL in North Carolina. It was called New Breed Logistics for those people who might know, but we did government. We had government. We did a lot of postal service work.
Hmm.
We did aerospace. We had a lot of big. We had Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, the Boeing defense side as key clients. Um, we did a lot of manufacturing, and for instance, one of the clients that we had that I supported was for Whirlpool, and we actually built out Whirlpool's network of appliance management and appliance returns and recycling
Hmm.
uh, areas. We stood up 12 warehouses within like 18 months to handle the nationwide network of appliance returns. So the customer would purchase a washing machine, it would fail or be a problem. Whirlpool would send somebody to pick up the machine. They'd bring it to us. We would examine it. We would refurbish it, or we would scrap it and strip it of all the usable parts for another piece. And then it would go to the Nicks and Dent stores. Um, did a lot of retail there. We had a lot of large retail customers. We actually had Verizon mobile phones as one of our customers. Um, Went into a smaller boutique consulting company called New Breed or NCS Partners then, and started off with doing some implementation, some configuration, some support of their customers. Nike was one of the customers that I worked on there. We stood up a new regional warehouse for regional retail and digital distribution of their orders, um, right at the beginning of the COVID. pandemic and the quarantine.
Hmm.
And now I am uh, building a new service, a new business in management consulting with NCS Partners to support supply chain intelligence to solve we're focusing on solving the supply chain visibility challenge that a lot of our partners and a lot of the industry are experiencing.
So,
Um,
so tell me about that.
we're
That is that kind of the new core. I don't want to say new core offering, but the core offering of NCS. Um,
No, NCS has uh, historically they've been suppliers, and they would support large WMS implementations.
okay.
So, for instance, Manhattan Associates and Corber Software, High Jump is one of those suppliers, and
WMS is warehouse management systems.
WMS, yeah, WMS is a warehouse management system,
Okay.
and then we would also implement and configure and implement and support the transportation management systems
Okay.
for those large suppliers, the TMS. Um,
And
and
typically,
from
I just want to
that,
make sure. I want to take a step back just to make sure that someone that
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
isn't as familiar. So, how did those two components work? The WMS, the warehouse management system, and the transportation system.
yes.
Do they have two different pieces? Typically, organizations have two different pieces that that aren't necessarily acting almost like an ERP, but are acting as like two standalone that kind of work together. Or how does that work typically?
Historically, they've worked as standalone, and in fact, historically, many companies, for all intents and purposes, outsource their transportation, their load planning, their load management. So we would work with a customer, for instance, we would with a customer on a warehouse management system implementation, and that supports uh, the inventory management and control. So it's the receiving, the shipping, the inventory storage. You're managing the inventory based on dates and based on lot numbers and sequencing and expiry dates and manufacturing dates. Um, and when you receive an order from a customer, let's say you're receiving an order from a wholesaler for so many pallets of products, the customer would build their shipment, send the shipment of X number, say they have 8 pallets of 6,000 units. They would send that load, if you will, to a transportation management company or routing company, and they would actually shop that load around to the different carriers. They would identify a carrier, confirm that carrier, schedule that carrier to come and pick up the load. They would tell us, we would update the WMS with that information and when that load needs to be moved to the dock and loaded on a certain trailer.
Okay.
And then the, uh, uh, the transportation management people would service would manage that load to delivery, and they would tell us when it was delivered, and we'd send confirmations to our customer and send the invoices for the cost of the goods and all of that
Okay.
good stuff.
Gotcha.
So historically, it's been a separate. It's been more. This is a general practice, and general practice, a general way of doing it is there's a lot of differences. A lot of companies there are many companies that manage the transportation themselves, but a lot of companies started outsourcing because they could get better rates, more efficient handling, and offload some of the complexities. So, and that's where the 3PLs, the third party logistics providers, really come into play as well. We very simply put, the third party logistics provider does warehousing inventory management for companies that don't want to do it.
That just want to probably focus. They may be a sales and marketing
Yep.
juggernaut that's what they want to focus on,
Yep.
and not have
Product
to worry about the
development.
back end. It's almost like outsourcing the complete back end in terms of other than the product development side, right? But once you have
It
the
is.
product developed and made, then it's kind of like outsourcing the entire fulfillment side of the
It is.
business.
It is. That's it exactly. It is. We've moved into an age of specialization, if you will. Everybody talks about specialization, and everybody talks about being able to focus and deep on certain aspects. And that's, if you take that a step up, from a higher level, you have these large companies, like you said, they like they do product development. They like to develop product. They may be apparel people. They may be fashion people. They may be eyewear or whatever it is. They focus on product development. They know their strength is not in logistics, in supply chain. So they feel more than happy to outsource and pay somebody else to do it because you're getting the efficiencies. Even the larger companies, give you an example, like a J.C. Penney or a Gap or a Limited Brands. At one point in time, they were the big people. They were the big boys on the block.
Yep.
They were the ones with the huge distribution centers. They were the ones with the huge network. They were the ones with the huge logistics and supply chain staff of engineers, that would actually do studies and improve their process and process optimization and flow optimization. And then the recession started hitting us, and slowly but surely, this is my theory. This is Tom Briette's theory of relativity, if you will. Um, the supply chain has always been the financial piggy bank to organizations. Organizations have historically been able to squeeze funding from supply chain through increasing efficiencies and reductions in cost.
So let me stop you right there. So are you saying that when you say I get your analogy in terms of the piggy bank, is that where they
Mhm.
look to say, hey, when we are trying to increase cash flow and we're trying to reduce expenditures during a downturn in the economy, we always know that we can go to the logistics card to
That's
try
it.
and squeeze out more efficiencies? Maybe talk
That's
about
it.
that. Yeah, maybe talk about that.
That's it exactly. So, um, you know, logistics in the supply chain. It's when companies started expanding globally, started going international for their manufacturing. For their
Mm-hmm.
let's stick with something simple. Let's stick with apparel. So companies started going to China in the early 90s, mid 90s. Eddie Bauer was one of the first companies that really took advantage of imports from China because of the cost. So they started they started putting factories in China manufacturing their clothing. Um, that drove significant cost savings back into the mothership, if you will. And the supply chain organizations became proficient at they focused on the process and the flow and optimizing the flow with the lowest cost provider, the lowest cost solution, the lowest cost shipping, the lowest cost everything. And what that did was it drove them to identify and contract and partner with one supplier, one transportation, one logistics, one shipping company, one ocean vessel company, in order to drive savings. So now, so the mothership, if you will, the main company, they got used to that. They got used to, I need to save $5 million next year in order to develop new products. Oh, look at here. I'm just going to cut the budget to supply chain. They'll figure out a way to do it. They always do. Uh, you know, and it worked. It worked. It worked. It worked. And then all of a sudden, we, through bad luck and really kind of an example, a worst case type scenario, we were hit with with the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, which disrupted significant manufacturing in China.
Biggest we've ever
And
seen, right? I mean, I would even
exactly,
argue. I would even argue that the likes of we haven't seen since probably even World War II. I can't even think of anything that even
well, I don't
resembles.
even, you know what, Terrence, I don't know that I this is one of those cases where I don't know that we've ever been in that situation before
Hmm.
because even the world wars, even World War II was the major disruptor. At that time, there was no true global
Yeah, you're
marketplace,
right. Yep,
you know,
you're right.
um, and we were just not. We were never prepared for the occurrence of what happened. You hear it all the time. Oh, it was 100. It was 100-year rain. It was 100-year heat wave. It was 1,000-year, once in a lifetime this, once in a lifetime that. Now these things are happening every year,
Yeah, it's
every six
crazy.
months. But the pandemic was really the I view the pandemic as the major disrupting force. Um, and the outcome of the pandemic need, if anybody learned anything from the pandemic, it was that we needed to change our focus from a lowest cost focus to a product supply focus.
Explain.
Lowest cost, I am able to drive efficiencies and reductions in cost by reducing the number of suppliers that I talk to. If I can provide a bigger contract to one supplier who is normally able to supply everything, I can squeeze significant savings out of it. If I am buying 60% from this supplier, 20% from this, and 20% from that supplier, I'm going to be paying more. But
You have
the benefit
contingencies.
is I have a guaranteed flow of product, right?
To your point, I think that is the one thing that we learned, right? I think if someone had said to either of us 5 years ago, hey, there's going to be an event where someone's basically going to stick a steel rod into the cogs and wheels of the
Yeah.
supply chain machine and it's going to come to a screeching halt, you'd say, that's not on my
Hmm.
bingo card, right?
Yeah.
But the pandemic, to your point, taught us the one thing, which is, hey, you're going to have to look at things in terms of going putting all your eggs in one basket to get the most cost effective, efficient logistical and distribution system. But you're going to have to weigh that now against something else that could potentially happen that could shut down in your entire business, right?
Exactly.
So is it worth the cost savings and efficiencies in order to remove any potential, you know, option Bs or contingencies, that.
You gotta, it's a different, you kind of have to look at it from a different cost model, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
It's almost like an
cost
insurance
model,
policy. It's almost an insurance
yeah, the
model.
cost model has shifted. Your cost, your factors driving costs have changed significantly. Um, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Um, how much did it cost companies to not have product to sell? I know,
I don't even know if there's an answer to that. I mean,
it's very right. So I was fascinated by this. We saw um, and we are continuing to see a series of disruptions through the market. The the quarantine and the shutdown of manufacturing in China really was
Mm-hmm.
really the driving that rod into the cogs of the machinery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what we saw was reactionary actions. Oh, this is broken. I'm going to address this, and then everything will be fixed. Oh, I addressed this, and then it's like, oh shit, I caused this other problem, and then it's oh crap, here's another problem I caused. So it wasn't so the problem of shutting down manufacturing a factory was compounded by the reactions of the supply chain to that shutdown, causing other disruptions. I saw something interesting during the quarantine. We all remember the milk shortages, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. Well, I saw a story about that there really was plenty of milk. There was a ton of milk in the network. There was just a ton of it. The problem was it was all packaged for a different distribution model. The majority of milk and dairy products were packaged for large, um, for hospital cafeterias, for large schools. So you have a 5 gallon can or a 10 gallon can of milk. I can't bring that into a grocery store and fill little jugs. That it's all trash, you know.
Yeah.
So it took a while to catch up. But the supply, the factory shuts down, and that's what we really saw. We saw this, think of it as we've always, in third party logistics startups, we've always looked at the startup process and the resulting challenges that you resolve as a bit of a snake eating an elephant, right?
One bite at a
It
time.
goes through the snake and it's being digested and getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's not, it takes a long time to go through there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the whole idea now, as I go rambling off on a ton of different tangents, to bring it back home again, initially, the last year to 18 months, maybe last year to two, let's say, there's been a heightened awareness on visibility in the supply chain. I need to see where everything is. I need to see that my load is on an ocean vessel that reached the customs, that went through customs and now is ready to be picked up to be moved. Which is all well and good. The challenge, as you were saying, is what do I do with that data? We've reached a point from a technology perspective where our networks are at the level where we can process, capture, store, and push huge amounts of data. You know, and the analytics require, the big problem with the data warehouses was always how do I process huge amounts of data and how do I push that data around my network? Because it doesn't do me any good to have my data here when I need it over here to
Right.
process. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now with the increased capacities in the network, the increased computer processing power,
Mm-hmm.
and what they call edge computing, which is really edge computing. I think of it as you're processing data at the point where it's actually generated and created, and you're able to pass the results back to another location where they can put results together from many edge areas, hence the name
Hmm.
edge, the
Okay.
edge of my reach, so that you can pass that data, perform the analytics, the advanced analytics. Now you add onto that the artificial intelligence leg, which is just, yeah, I mean, everybody hears about that, Chat GPT, and oh, it's going to be the end of the world and all of this other crap. Um, But all of these pieces are starting to come together where you can actually do the advanced analytics. The end result is an intelligence, right? And the intelligence is how you react to visibility. So the intelligence gives you the ability to sense a disruption, sense a change, sense a delay in your supply chain. And the intelligence also gives you options, scenarios that you can play out to limit the impact of that.
Basically,
Of that.
to aid in to aid in the business's decision making.
Exactly. To react to limit the impact of that disruption so that it's not a reactionary, it's a prescriptive or a product. It's a preview. You're actually able to to do scenario analysis and pick the best scenario. And as things change, as it's going through, you're able to redo and redo and redo so that you are refining and tuning throughout the whole process. And that gets to the point where I call it a supply network. We're really not talking about a supply chain because a supply chain implies a single line.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really changing it. We are changing this concept from a supply chain to a supply network. Think of a social network, right? Think of Facebook or LinkedIn as you're communicating with all different people from all different platforms, from all different companies, all different solutions. You're kind of looking at you're changing your supply chain into a network similar to that, such that if I have a problem with this one raw material, then I go out to my network and I'm able to shop it out, which is what which is what the tie it back into the transportation management, right? These companies would go out and shop the load out to multiple carriers. We need the ability to go out and shop out raw materials and production capacity, factory capacity in the same manner so that we can meet the demand. The key is to focus on support the demand, not
Right.
the cost.
Right.
It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do you any good to have an 85% markup if you ain't got shit to sell.
Right. If you have a sole
You
source
know
supplier that's completely shut down, it doesn't matter if you have an 85% margin because your margin has now
exactly.
gone to zero because your revenue is now zero.
Exactly. That's my whole point. And you know what the funny thing is? This is where age comes into play.
I call it experience.
Yeah. In the late 80s and early 90s, when the market was expanding globally, um, there was always this initial practice to to produce the bulk of products. They focused on producing 60 to 80% of the products overseas at the lowest cost, but they backfilled and hit the peaks and supported the peaks and valley in demand locally
Huh.
so that they had a quicker turnaround.
Okay.
Well, in the 90s, people got so comfortable with the supply chain and the efficiencies in the shipping and all of that that they completely eliminated, for all intents and purposes, the manufacturing capacity, at least in the United States.
Yeah.
You know, and now we seem to be going back to that very point when you start talking about nearshoring or reshoring production capacity.
Yeah.
So
It's almost like, I mean, again, lessons are to be learned and history repeats itself. And it's,
mhm,
I think even going through the last several years that you realize you can't have all your eggs in one basket, and
exactly.
we need to bring more manufacturing
Mhm.
back to, the United States. You just can't afford, businesses can't afford just to go all in with one
No,
supplier, and especially a
no,
supplier
we've learned.
overseas.
We hopefully. My concern is that. Um, my concern is that our memory is short and we forget all of the things that we learn and we fall back into bad old habits. But now tying it back, attempting to tie it back into what am I doing now with and for NCS partners.
Yeah, and specifically as you're going to go into it, what are some of the you know in terms of marketing terms, what are some of the pain points that your prospects are seeing, your clients are seeing? What are they trying to accomplish? And so maybe you can tie that in with what you guys are doing now at NCS with what's most
Yeah,
important, which is what the problems and desired outcomes that your prospects and clients are trying to get to.
Terrence, I think you know at first I got all wound up in developing a new service and new solutions with NCS partners
Mm-hmm.
because the visibility and intelligence side from the supply chain is are both very shiny objects, very alluring, very sexy, right? Um, Lately, though, I've come to the realization that the more important aspect is how do we react to this? If you look at, I try to look at it from a digital transformation aspect because the digital transformation is not a destination; it's a journey because the technology is changing so quickly, so frequently, in such kind of disruptive manner that you need to work with somebody that's on top of it, that has their finger on the pulse of that, and is able to help their clients understand what that means to them and focus that understanding to meet the client's business goals, objectives, and challenges. So I've come to the belief now that the probably the single greatest value that we can provide to our client is the um, development and support of an agile strategic plan. Strategic planning is one of those things. I saw an interesting, you know, I have 10,000 interesting stories, interesting points of life. Um, but I became very interested in strategy because that's where it all is. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the strategic planning process is really in a time of disruption now
Yes, totally agree
itself
with you. Yeah.
because the standard legacy strategic planning or strategic plan was always a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. There's no such thing as a 5-year plan anymore. And God
It's
knows the last time a 10-year plan was actually any kind of accurate. You're looking at more. The long term is really 3 years, but the 3 years is all squishy. So you're kind of
totally
that's
agree.
where if you smash together a strategic plan and agile methodology, you come up with an agile strategic plan that you are continuously evaluating and refining. You're not redoing. The problem with the strategic plan is you looked at large scale, huge implementations that would take multiple years. And we are way past that right now. If you wait multiple years in order to be able to support your business, you're going out of business.
Yeah.
I
And
firmly believe that.
I completely agree with you, and I think a large part of it can be the AI LLM, the acceleration of that
Mhm.
into the business world. I think that's a big part. I think
It
there's a lot of
is.
factors, but I think there's a huge potential opportunity cost for businesses that are not developing a strategy that is on from the standpoint of
Mhm.
an agile type that can be adapted and adopted over time. Because I I even in some of my own businesses, I've told my folks, like, don't even worry about anything beyond 3 years, because we
Yeah.
may look 12 months from now and we may completely throw that 3-year plan out the window and have to build something not necessarily from scratch, but completely looks completely different than it would be today.
You're going in a completely new direction. You find out that it's more appropriate for your capabilities to completely change direction. look at it from a different perspective. And that's what from my perspective, the most important service and solution that NCS Partners can provide to our clients is the long-term technical advisor. We're the ones, think of the supply chain. You had a lot of supply, you have a lot of these, the big eight, the Accenture, the IBM, the Deloitte, Ernst and Young, um, huge companies, huge supply chain practice. They are the ones. They're. It's true. That old saying is true. Nobody ever got fired for bringing
Hired by
IBM in,
IBM. Yep. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
The problem, everybody wants the IBM service, but nobody has. But a smaller and smaller portion of the market actually has the money to pay for an IBM, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we have NCS Partners has a um, I think we are at the forefront of a shift in the way that things are done, similar to the shift in the supply chain where they started shedding all of the engineers from the major companies, from the J.C. Penney, from the
Mm-hmm.
Gap, from the these limited brands. Um, and those people were snapped up by management consulting firms, and they work. So now a company can come to the management consulting firm to develop a strategy for them. We will do that for your long-term strategic plan for your organization and how it relates back into the supply chain. And the focus is not so much on a particular technology or a particular practice, but it's on your business. How do we solve your problems? You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's. I
I
mean,
don't. I don't.
that right there, Tom, is the single most important thing, and everyone agrees on it, right? For the most part.
Right.
But it
Right.
is. It truly is about looking and understanding what the prospect or client's real problem, what that problem is they're trying to solve, and bringing a solution, whatever that solution may be, to it.
Right.
It's not coming with a prepackaged offering to say, "Yeah, great. Here's your problem-solving box right here." Right? I mean,
Exactly. Exactly. It's all this piece solves that problem. This piece solves that problem. But then, what problems are they generating? You know. You, so you take two things together. You take the agile methodology to your strategic planning process, and then you marry that process to a continuous improvement process, evaluation process, so that you are continuously reviewing your supply chain and evaluate your strategic plan and identifying deficiencies and challenges. Did the change that I made implemented meeting my strategic plan to solve this business problem perform as I expected it to, as I wanted it to? You won't know that for 3 months after you've gone live, right? So it's important that you're taking that aspect and you're reevaluating it so you can tune it. And as technology improves, then you can take that into account. And so it's more it that's why I say it's a journey. You're taking steps
hundred
through it,
percent. Yeah.
right?
Yep. And that's kind of what I was going to ask you next, is kind of walk us through what that journey looks like. Again, there's nothing that's typical, but walk us through kind of the framework of a journey that you would take with either with a new client or even an existing that you may have a new
Right,
issue
right.
or challenge you're trying to
Well,
solve.
so the first point from a new client is a business opportunity review, a business requirements review. What is your business objective? What are your objectives? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Let's say. Let's start with 3 years, and then we'll start slicing it down to get to a more granular level. But what are your sales objectives? What are your revenue objectives? What are the things that are holding you back from those objectives? right? Don't look at it from, well, too many times I talk to people that want to do a digital transformation. And when I start to ask some questions, I realize they're not talking about a digital transformation. They're talking about a process improvement, a process evaluation and improvement. So the important thing is to actually get to a point where we understand the goals of the company and the challenges. Then we can come back, and once everybody agrees, this is where we're at right now, and this is what we're trying to solve for. Then we can take a look at it and say, which are the priorities? Let's hit the first priority, then let's hit the second priority, and so on and so forth. But each time we hit that priority, it's a matter of evaluating, coming down to a next level of, okay, so I want to increase my sales by you know $50 million next year. Okay, so what's holding me back from that? What are the challenges to meeting that goal? Let's focus on those. Is it procurement? Is it product development? Is it product availability? Is it throughput? Is it shipping? Is it actually being able to deliver, to distribute to the customer? Where are those problems? And we develop that plan. Now, the strategic plan we're looking at, I like to think of it as a 3 to 6 month plan. So we're continuously, the point there is the critical value that we can bring, the business value that we can bring to that is that if we focus on a 3 to 6 month cycle, we're able to deliver business value, business payback faster and earlier in order to pay for that cycle going forward.
I,
The
I,
goal is self-funding.
I
My
cannot agree with you more. I mean, literally, as I was listening to you, that's essentially, obviously we focus on the sales and marketing aspect for IT consulting firms, and that's what you described. That entire process is exactly what we do as well. And so my thought was that is like, here's Tom talking about how to utilize it from a management strategy, logistics standpoint.
Mhm.
We employ the same thing on the sales and marketing, but we're talking about the same thing, which is,
Yeah,
don't go in trying to solve a problem with something in your box, right? Go in and truly understand it. It's amazing, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. We do this as the first thing when we take on a client is we have a workshop, and we call it an ICP workshop, an ideal client prospect workshop, and
hmm,
involve everybody, right? Everybody in that organization. Typically, we're talking 10 to 20 people. So these are small to
right.
mid-sized firms,
Hmm.
but we get everybody involved and take them through a questionnaire process and take them through a workshop to understand, hey, who do you think is your best customer? Who do you think your best clients are, right? Which is can sometimes be completely different than what leadership thinks, right? And
Right.
essentially all we're trying to do as information gatherers is to try and understand, where is everyone trying to go? What's the desired outcome? What are the challenges and bottlenecks that exist in order,
Hmm.
to get them there? But it's just fascinating to me. Ours is sales and marketing stuff, but you're talking about the
Right.
exact same
Right.
methodology protocol to
Well,
success.
I've been involved in a lot of failures. Well, I've been involved in a lot of implementations that took longer to succeed than others. Let me put it that way. It's never a failure. Um, but the challenging initiatives have always related to ineffective communication, ineffective goal setting. So, my opinion, my experience is it is absolutely critical to any type of success that you start off with everybody in the room, and everybody needs to be, the leadership has to have buy-in.
100%.
So I like to think of it as everybody's head is moving north and south.
Right,
I get
right.
it. I agree. This is where we're at, right?
Right.
And then you get to the point of what are our objectives and what can we do in the next 6 months. And again, everybody needs to be nodding north and south. Everybody needs to be committed when you walk out of that, because you're you're looking for and then it's the old fashioned tools. It's a racy plan, right? Who's responsible? Who has responsibilities? who's producing, who's approving, who's informational, and so on and so forth. But you need to have that process in place. You need to have a change review process in place. How are we going to define a change? What are we going to do with a change? Who needs to approve a change? Are there different levels of change approval? Once you have that in place, you'll be amazed at how quickly you move, right? But it's the communications and it's the agreement that actually needs to get started. And you know what, Terrence? That's a success factor no matter what business you're in.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think one part of it is we're humans and we like to take the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
those things that we just described in terms of getting everyone together, not necessarily getting everyone on the same page, but get everyone's input and then saying, hey, here's where we're going to go. Everyone agreement, get the north and south. Everyone's rowing the boat in the right
Mm-hmm.
direction type of thing. But as going back to the path of least resistance and what we just described, it can be a little bit of hard work, right? I mean, it's not
Right.
easy. It's much easier to just say, hey, I think I know who our customer is, or hey, I think this is the right decision. But it's a little bit of work, right? And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
imperative upon us, right? Yourself as a solutions provider, not pulling something out of the
Mm-hmm.
box to drop on
Mm-hmm.
their table and say that's going to solve your problem. To truly be a solution provider is to go through that hard work, right? Make it kind of
Yeah.
be that person that says, hey, or be that that business or firm or enterprise that is willing to say we need to go through this hard work. Nothing it never comes easy, right? Whether it's in
Right.
business or
Right.
life, but it's just so imperative and so important to getting the desired outcome that everyone's trying to get to.
Mm-hmm. And what you're looking at though is um, people can be scared off of the getting started
Mm-hmm.
because as we're talking about this, it starts to you see the realization spreading. This is a little bit more involved. I can't go to Tom and just say, how much is it cost? Is it going to cost me to do a digital transformation?
Pull
No,
something,
I've
pull
got. He's
something out of your bag there, Tom.
that
Give me
bastard
some.
turned it over to me to ask to tell me what I want to explain it. Um, so it's a little intimidating, but and that's where the long term comes into play. Hopefully, the people that I want to work with, the people that I'm talking to, are the ones that are open to a relationship. It's not a transactional. Management consulting is not transactional. It's not once and done. It's a relationship. It's a long term relationship. I want to be the guy in 7-Eleven selling packs of gum to people, and I want to have the customers that come in every damn day and buy a pack of gum
Not because they need it, because they want to see.
because they want to see it. I go to Dunkin' Donuts, I go to Dunkin' Donuts every day because I like to get out of the house for a bit, clear my head, and I like to engage with the people. It's
Yeah,
like you start to get into it. You're developing relationships, and humans need relationships in order to be happy.
yeah.
And it's amazing what you learn if you listen. And I learned a long time ago. It costs me nothing to smile at somebody and say good morning. But it pays off, and those people remember you. Everybody. I travel pretty significantly, and I go through the airport quite often, and I always go into the. I always check a bag, so I'm always going into the agent counter, the customer service person. And I was talking to somebody one day, and I came back about a month later and saw him again. And I walked up to the line and I said, "Where is everybody? I haven't seen it this empty in I don't know how long." Swear to God, this guy looked up at me and said, "I remember you. Come on over. I'll take care of you." That's the difference. It's somebody that's comfortable with you, that knows you, and that's what I'm looking to create for the customers. Is I want I want my customer to think, you know what? I'm going to call up Tom and ask him what he thinks about this. I've got this problem. What does he think? Does he have any suggestions? What does he think about this? Because he's always done me right and he's looked at it from my perspective, and he's never looked at it as, forcing anything upon me. He just always wanted to do the right thing, and it pays off.
I
So that's
100%.
my,
I
you
100%
know,
agree with you. I tell folks this all the time. I've helped prospects that have gone through our process that just weren't a good fit, or timing wasn't right, and I've helped them along the way with different things. Right, that I've said, call me for my opinion. My opinion is free.
yeah,
I give it
hmm
away freely. It is zero cost to you, right? Because it's my opinion and
hmm
that's all it is. And take it along with a multitude of other people that you may trust their
well,
opinions.
hopefully it's worth a little bit more than they pay for it, right? If they're not,
It better be. If it's not, then I'm not doing my job, right? I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is
exactly,
to deliver an
exactly.
exceptional value proposition that should be more valuable than the monetary exchange. At least from my standpoint, I would bet you would think the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, a blatant plug here for NCS
Plug
Partners.
away.
We've been in business for about 12 years, 10 to 12 years. Um, every customer that we started off with, we still have.
Wow, that's impressive.
And that is not, and those are big, Fortune 100 companies, some of them. This is a Nike. We do work with Target. We do work with Subaru. We do work with with Crocs. We do work with a lot of Newell. We do work with a lot of large companies, and they come back, and they continue to come back because we have that relationship, and we're not looking for the short term. We're looking always at the long term and what's best for the customer, because that's what makes you successful.
That alone speaks volumes. Anyone that can say that, any firm, I don't care what they're doing, any firm that can say that,
Mm-hmm.
that speaks volumes. So, all right, so we covered a lot of ground, but we have a ton more, but we're gonna have to wrap it for today. But I want to ask you this: if business owner, or executive, probably an executive is watching this
Mm-hmm.
today, and thinks we're both two of the smarter guys, but you're the smarter of the two, and wonders how you can help them, right? Like, what's a good next step for them? I think we just kind of touched on the conversation part, but what would you
Yeah,
suggest is kind of a good next step for them to
I
reach out?
I think a good next step is a simple phone call or a simple email, a connection. You know what? I do a lot of connections. I'm starting to look at LinkedIn as a very important connecting tool. Because you can throw something out there. You throw a line out there with a worm and a bobber on it, right? And you can always get in touch with me through LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect and talk. I'm quick to provide my email and my phone number. Sometimes it drives my wife crazy, but I'm good for, you know, it's good for the initial conversation, and let's just have an initial conversation. And what are you thinking? What's your key challenge? That's what I want to talk about. What's your key challenge? What do you need help with?
I, I
You know,
I love that's exactly how I start off conversations as well with folks. Is like, hey, tell me your biggest challenge. Like, what is your biggest challenge, right? Like, let's just
hmm
talk about it, right? I mean, I don't know
yeah,
if I can help you, but at least I'll be able to give you a different perspective, right? And
yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's a great way, Tom, to open up those conversations, right? Like, hey,
hmm
what's on the side of your desk? What's the biggest problems that's staring you in the face that's keeping you from getting your organization to where you want it to go?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And if I don't, here's the good thing. If one of the benefits of experience is your network of contacts. And one of the benefits of being upfront, helpful, and honest is contacts have a tendency to remember that and respond. I talked to somebody in Atlanta. I met him 15 15 years ago in Atlanta, and we just hit it off, and uh, we've remained in contact. There'll be time where we don't talk to each other for years, and something comes up, and I give him a call, and he's like, "You tell me what you need. You know, you've always done me right. Tell me what you need. I'll help any way I can. Or I'll guide you to somebody that can help." And that's the way I look at it. It's
Yeah.
pay it forward,
Oh,
as they say.
I'm a huge value forward, pay it forward type of guy. So,
Hmm.
okay, well,
Hmm.
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna make sure and put your links. I don't know. I'm not gonna point. I've stopped doing that. In fact, I sit on my hands now, so I don't start pointing all over the place in terms of here's where I'm gonna
Yeah,
put the links for you. But I will make sure that the links to your LinkedIn profile. I'll even give your email address upon your permission there,
perfect.
and
Perfect.
we will do
Absolutely.
that. But the only thing I ask is that you come back. I definitely love having you. I love having this conversation. You and I know we could talk for hours, and I would love to carry on this
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation again. So
Yeah. I
greatly,
look forward to it, Terrence.
yeah,
This was really I really enjoyed myself. I really look forward to
good.
future discussion.
Well, I love it. Well, I appreciate you joining me today, and I will take you up on that. We'll look forward to having you back on the Grow IT podcast in the real near future.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Thanks
All
again.
right. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye now.